It's spooky season. Happy Friday. Welcome to another episode of Murders, Mysteries, and More. My name's Kaylee.
My name is Desi.
Be sure to like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell next to the subscribe button to turn on post notifications. Before we get into this case, we always encourage those who have useful information to any unsolved case. Please report it to your local police and sheriff department.
Today, we will be tracking down the mystery behind the 9 missing Soviet hikers that died in the Ural Mountains. January 23, 1959, a group of experienced skiers organized by a man named Igor Dyatlov headed out for the Ural Mountains. The Ural Mountains start from north to south and run to western Russia. These mountains include from just off the coast of the Arctic Ocean to the River Ural and northwestern Kazakhstan.
The section of the group the skiers were trekking was the northern portion of the mountains, specifically Kholat Syakhl. What's really eerie is that Kholat Syakhl means Mountain of the Dead in Mansi language, and the Mansi are the indigenous of the Ural Mountains. At one point, one of the hikers had left the trip early due to illness. Igor Dyatlov, who was only 23 years old at the time, was leading the group. The group is supposed to complete a 200-mile hike around the mountains.
So the group of skiers went missing on February 1st or 2nd, not completely disclosed by anyone. They had dug into the mountain, and from what was discovered from diaries and cameras that they were able to piece together later on by investigators, the team began to make their way through an unnamed pass leading to Torton. They were hit with several snowstorms that ripped through the pass, which decreased visibility, causing the team to lose sense of direction. They accidentally deviated west and found themselves on the slope of a nearby mountain. Of course, this is Kholat Syakhl. They had dug into the mountain, and their diaries say that they pitched a tent on February 1st, but they did not return, of course. So, Soviet Russia had to search and rescue, but it was very difficult to search the mountains, of course. But when the investigators had arrived at the campsite, they noticed that the tent was completely cut open in a way that proved it was from the inside, and most of their belongings had been left at camp. So that's a little odd, especially because after that they discovered 8 or 9 sets of footprints, which, keep in mind, this was a group of 9 skiers. So for them to say 8 or 9 is a little weird. And of course, they found the bodies about a mile away from the campsite.
Now to the victims. So something in common is that all these victims were college students, so they were all in their 20s. Obviously, there was a leader, Igor Dyatlov, and he was 23 years old, male. They claimed his cause of death was hypothermia. And then there was Alexander Kholat, 24, also male, said he died of hypothermia. And then Lyudmila Dubinina, she was 20 and she's a female, and her result of death was internal bleeding. And then Nikolay Brignol died of a head injury. And then there was Rustam, 23, male, hypothermia. Semyon Zolotaryov, he was 38, male, head injury. And then there's the 2 Yuri, they're male, one was 21, one was 23, hypothermia. Zina Ada Komomogrova, 22, female, and cause of death, hypothermia. And then the ways that, it was, horrific. Some of the most bodies were discovered under the tree, and if you actually look at the corpse pictures, some of their heads are really disoriented. You could tell that there had to be, brain damage. It was just so horrific how these people were found. It doesn't look if someone saw these bodies, it to them will look like someone obviously did something horrible to these people, because it doesn't look like normal decomposing bodies.
No, because only half of I think portion of these bodies were like decomposed. Some of them were still somewhat intact,
Right.
kind of.
How would they have all these like bruises and abrasions and their skull be like that? And even some of them obviously had suffered from hemorrhaging in the brain. It was clear like something had to hit them.
What I think is weird, like the strangest out of all what they discovered with these victims, is the fact that Miss Dubanina, but her injuries included a missing tongue.
Yeah, and that cannot just be explained by hypothermia or just like an avalanche, really.
All right, so on to the theories as to what happened to these poor unfortunate people. Theory number 1. So there's a couple of theories that I'm going to go over in this one. It's going to be a lot, so we're going to unpack it. But the first one I'm going to start with is going to be avalanche / natural causes. Obviously, this is like probably one of the most common theories, of course, due to what their cause of deaths were ruled as. It does make a lot of sense, I guess, in some ways, because they are in a mountain, of course. So avalanches do happen, and avalanches are very deadly, and they are very likely to kill people. They don't discriminate, so they are more likely going to take out a group of 9 people, of course. But also, it's also not likely because of the fact that some of their injuries, such as a missing tongue and
brain damage.
And they walked down the mountain. They didn't run. So I don't know if there could have been another disturbance, that could have caused an avalanche, but there was also no signs of an avalanche. So this seems a little unlikely, but natural causes, of course, is likely because hypothermia does happen. Things such as paradoxal undressing, lack of heat.
And they were negative. The average is negative 6 degrees in those Ural Mountains, so that's caught us back.
Right.
Definitely have to have a lot of layers.
With avalanches, when vortex are capable of producing infrasound that may have developed as well. But there's also animals that are up in those mountains, such as vipers, wolves, elk, bears. Could have very easily attacked them and killed them, but if that was the case, you would probably see more like traumatic injuries as far as like torn limbs or torn faces or etc., versus like just hypothermia, crushed skulls, missing tongues. So my question to you is, what do you think out of those theories is the more likely one in this case, knowing what has all happened to these people?
I definitely say like hypothermia, because obviously some of the bodies were found with their clothes off, and we know about paradoxal undressing. And then also the fact, as well as like some of the other ones just don't make a lot of sense. Like there wasn't a ton of signs about an avalanche, even though it is possible that there still could have been one. But with an avalanche, I feel like all their body would be gone, and that's really not the case. And then for the animal wise, like animals, obviously like wolves and bears would have tore their body apart and would have just straight up eaten their entire body, and we did not really see that, so that's like not as likely. Also, they were in the more northern part, not to say that the animals can't go up there, but usually the bears stayed in more the southern parts of the mountain. And also for like elk as well, like you would have seen like a body that looked like it had been trampled and all that, and really the only injuries was mostly their messed up skulls and then the missing tongue and like fake abrasions, but you didn't see like limbs or anything off. So I definitely think it's more hypothermia, if anything.
My next question is, do you think that the hikers, skiers, my bad, do you think that the group of skiers could have done this to each other to make it look like a hypothermia death or some sort of other cause of death?
I mean, it is possible, can't rule anything out. And we do have some other theories, and that we will be covering that a little bit more. But yeah, it definitely is. It definitely is possible because considering how cold it is outside and everything, it's just easy to just make up for that to be the cause of death, even if somebody pissed somebody off and then they all went on like a rampage and killed each other. Okay, which leads us into the next two theories. The first one is the indigenous people of the Ural Mountains, the Mansi people, killed them off. Or the whole like homicide, how they went crazy and killed each other. So, first of all, the Ural Mountains does belong to the Mansi people, and they might have accidentally trespassed some of the land of the Mansi people. So obviously that would set them off. Also, the Mansi people are going to know the mountains much better because this is their land. So they're going to have that advantage over these skiers. No matter how experienced they are, this is a mountain and this is not really where they grew up at. So the Mansi is going to clearly have that upper hand. All of the belongings of them were all found intact. You would think if the Mansi people went after them, they would be going through their belongings, and we didn't see that. And then for the homicide, there is like a theory that, so there is this psychedelic mushroom called the agaric fly mushroom. And this mushroom is known to produce really strong hallucinations. And when people are hallucinating, they're not going to think clearly. They're also on this mountain and it's super cold and everything. So they could totally have gone crazy and just went after each other. So my first question for you is going to be, do you think the indigenous people of the Ural Mountains killed these hikers because maybe they accidentally were trespassing?
I mean, it'd be a little extreme to kill somebody just because they're trespassing on your lands, but you'd be crazy with day tribes. Of course, history has not been kind to tribes, so I can understand why. But I feel like, especially according to the reports, that the Mansi are by nature friendly and don't really encounter like tourists or anything up in that side of the mountains very often. I think it's more unlikely that the Mansi people did this.
Right, and you would think that if they went after them, they would be taking their belongings and stuff, and they were all left alone. My next question is, do you think that the hikers took these psychedelic fly mushrooms and they had some hallucinations and maybe went and killed each other?
Hey, people do like taking psychedelic mushrooms, of course. People don't do their research when they go out skiing and hiking as far as plant life and whether or not they're very venomous or can have very serious side effects. So it's very possible they saw some mushrooms. They're like, hey, let's have a good trip, have fun on our trip, whatever. Because we're up in the fucking mountains anyways. And they all could have went crazy and killed each other. Very possible. If that did happen, you would think there would maybe be one survivor still left, unless, they just died of natural causes or killed themselves.
There's also another theory floating around that there could have been a possible maybe love triangle. Something went wrong with that, and then they ended up fighting, and then they end up getting killed in the process. So do you think that there could have been a love triangle going on, and this is how these people ended up dead?
I mean, that's a little extreme for a love triangle, though. For 9 people to end up dead.
True.
That's a little extreme, and you would think that at least 2 at that point would still be alive, or 1 person.
It does also say that Kravan is Shiniko. He had a short fuse and a hot temper, and basically, they said he was very mouthy. So, do you think he could have started some shit?
That's possible. Everybody likes to start shit, especially over women.
Nope, I think you answered them pretty good.
Okay. Which gets us into Theory 3. Yetis, aliens, and maybe even fireballs. So to start off with this one, as far as theories go, these are some pretty fucking crazy theories, of course. But with any case like this, to be expected, Yetis and aliens. You know, there are people who are believers out there. I'm not knocking them down. They're kind of crazy sometimes. There are footprints that cannot be replicated by humans, and there are some supposedly reported attacks. Witnesses did say they saw orbs, or whatever they saw. Most people saw what we call fireballs, of course, and they took those as evidence that aliens were involved. And they kind of even went out too far to say, but what if the government lied about test launches to cover up alien activity? Now, I don't know if the government would go that far.
Area 51.
Yeah, pretty much. What is kind of more likely in this sense, as far as the fireballs, is that there are many reports around the time of this group's death of strange lights in the sky flying in orange. Most people, of course, thought they were orbs.
Have you heard even people think that Obama was a part of an alien?
Yeah, I've heard that. A bunch of other people think that this could have been a military accident. You know, Soviet Union could have been testing their weapons, nuclear or not. I mean, this was the time period where Soviet Union was kind of crazy. There was this Cold War that was going on between Russia and the United States. Well, Soviet Union at the time. So them testing their nuclear weapons isn't really far-fetched out there. But my question is, do you believe aliens could have done this? Or even Yetis? Do you believe in that sort of thing at all?
So, while yes, I do believe in extraterrestrial life. However, the thing is, I don't necessarily think that was their cause of death. Sure, there's probably another set of artificial intelligence all the way out there in the galaxy. Would not be surprised. However, the fact though is there's just not sure you can be oh, that's an orb in the sky. But until you get a clear picture, we can't really tell that is an actual UFO. We don't have any videos of any UFOs over there. Full-on videos of them just taking these people in the UFO and just taking them away or whatever. So I don't think the alien thing. And then for Yetis, I don't think that one either. While I'm sure there might be some sort of animals out there that we don't necessarily know about. But at the same time, I feel if these Yetis or Bigfoots really have existed, and we've seen all these sightings, how come we have never gotten a clear picture of it? For all we know, someone could have dressed it up in a Yeti costume and fucking did this. That would be more likely than an actual Yeti. So I don't think so much it was Yetis or aliens. I think that's too far-fetched for this.
My next question is, do you believe that this could have truly been a military accident?
It is possible. The government has effed up before. And, again, we don't know everything the government is doing. Nobody has, a normal person does not have access to Area 51. So the government could be doing something crazy and we don't know. It is possible, and obviously the mountains is a great place in general for the military really to practice stuff, because it's the middle of nowhere and there's really not a bunch of civilians in the way, and unfortunately these people might have accidentally trespassed into some military area, or the military was doing something and they didn't realize that there were these people there and they done fucked up. Who knows? But yeah, I wouldn't really put it past. Which leads into our last theory. It was the government. First of all, people do say that during this time that the Soviet Union was possibly practicing rocket launchers out there. Again, would not put it past them because nuclear weapons. Also, a lot of people said that they were having secret meetings out here as well. It is confirmed that there was parachute mine testing during the 50s. And so these people could have just been at the wrong place at the wrong time. And obviously that's how they ended up dead. However, if there really was like a bunch of rocket launches out there, you would see a lot more radiation. Like their body would be testing more positive for radiation, and that wasn't the case. Only a couple items had a little bit of radioactivity that was detected, but it was confirmed that one of the dudes worked at like a place where he was exposed to radiation, so that's a totally different thing. Visitors have gone like since there and whatnot, and the wildlife has not changed. Like with Chernobyl, the wildlife truly changed and babies were really deformed. But out here, that just did not happen, so I don't think that they were really shooting off rockets out there. So my question to you is, do you think that they could have died because they were doing the parachute mine testing? They end up being at the wrong place at the wrong time.
It's very possible. I mean, things do happen, unfortunately. The military does mess up and doesn't always check to make sure that people aren't in the zones that they're not supposed to be, or you can't see everything. So these people could have just been in the wrong place in the wrong time, unfortunately.
My next question to you is, there was a lack of radioactivity in the islands. If they were really doing rocket launches out there, how come none of like the wildlife and there was just like a lack of radioactivity if they were doing rocket launches? How come that's possible?
Truthfully, that's not really possible unless it was like rocket launches done in small quantities, enough to where it wouldn't be detectable, or if this was like their first time doing a rocket launch, that could be another possibility as well.
Yeah, I agree. Like, it just does not seem very plausible for that to be the case. My next question is, if the government was having secret meetings out there, what do you think the secret meetings were about?
Probably how to fucking kill all of us over here in the United States, because at that time it was a Cold War. You know, we were competing with Russia for the space mission and all that stuff.
Space race.
So, you know, they could have been plotting how to beat us, you know, what they could do to set us further behind. They could have been plotting to take us over, who knows? They're capable of anything, just like any other country is. So, after hearing all the theories, what's the most likely theory that we believe? For me personally, I think that hearing all the evidence, causes of death and everything, I feel like this could be the work of a homicide or a severe, like, brutal avalanche. Just because of the fact that a lot of them had crushed skulls, you know, one of them had a missing tongue. It's very, like, hard to have a missing tongue from an avalanche unless, you know, at the time
you're sticking your tongue out.
Well, or you're just, you know, talking and you claim dung on your tongue and an avalanche comes too. But it's more likely to lose your tongue if you were murdered.
Right. But how come their clothes, some of their clothes was off?
That could have been a really sick-ass person in the head who decided he wanted to strip half of the people.
True.
Or, you know, that could have happened before they died. They could have started to have hypothermia where paradoxical undressing did happen, and then as far as the homicide goes, one of them could have went crazy and killed everybody. Because hypothermia does a little bit of fucked up shit to your brain.
And they could have been on mushrooms at this time too. So
it could be a combination.
Yeah. Because, like, imagine being on some shrooms and then you're suffering from hypothermia because the shrooms are making you hallucinate and think that it's warm and it's not, and you're taking all these clothes off and then boom, an avalanche comes at you.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I definitely agree with you with those. And I can definitely see the homicide too, because if they were taking those mushrooms, which were out there, it could clearly make somebody trip hardcore and them start killing each other or fighting off each other.
It's not uncommon for people to kill each other on drugs. It's actually more common.
Right. And
What do you think?
also, if they were having hypothermia, they could have thought, well, we need to fight to death or we're all gonna die.
Yeah, they could have been in a fight or flight mode
Yeah.
at that point. What theory do you believe the most?
I feel like a combination. I mean, I agree with what you said, but I feel like a combination of homicide and the mushrooms. I'm thinking they got hypothermia, like, after that. They were just tripping so much and couldn't find their way back. Basically, that's why they ended up with hypothermia.
Very possible.
Yep, to this day, we have no idea exactly what happened, but as you can tell, there is so many different theories just out there. Yeah. So in the comments below, comment what theory that you believe is the most true.
Yep, and with that, thank you for listening to another episode of Murders, Mysteries, and More. Remember to always keep your eyes open because you never know when someone's creeping.